Do you like movies and television? Would you like to learn more about the magic behind the movies and learn how they get from the minds of the creators to the screen? Do you consider yourself a bit of a film buff and would like to know more without going back to school? Then this is the show for you. Mincing Movie Magic is a broadcast designed to stimulate your intellect and explore the minds of screenwriters, producers, directors, and others behind the scenes who create the real magic we see on the screen. Each week, you can listen to screenwriter and producer Tom Blumquist and professional magician Scott Wells as they discuss film and the magic that goes into every production. From time to time, they welcome friends from the movie industry to give other points of view that brought their visions to life on screen. This is Mincing Movie Magic. Please welcome Hollywood writer, producer, and director Tom Blumquist, along with your host, Scott Wells.
And there I am, and let me bring in my fellow buddy over there, Mr. Tom Blumquist. Hey there, Tom. How are you, buddy?
I'm all right, but I'm not so sure about stimulating the intellect promise of this show. That may be legally actionable. If anybody's ever listened to us, good Lord.
Well, the thing that should be stimulating should be a little light.
Okay. Here's to you.
And back at you.
I hope Dana's hammered.
This week is a little bit different, by the way, because it's live. Last week it was not live. Also, I'm broadcasting actually from my son's home in Dallas, Texas. So Nick is up here. Nick's the one who actually came up with this name for Mincing Movie Magic. And so I'm using my granddaughter's bedroom, and I've got a green screen behind me, which doesn't really work all that great. But the reason I mentioned about what was going on with the where are we? Yeah, here we go. Last week we had a recording of the show because of some extenuating circumstances. We really couldn't get everybody here at the same time, and so it was recorded. But it was live. This again is live, and so you can interact. We invite you, please, to ask questions, and to the extent that our guests can answer these, or Tom or I can answer them, we can do that quickly in real time. But there are a couple of questions that were asked last week. If I can go with this.
So for people who did not see the show, it was Ron Raymond, fine composer, award-winning composer, good friend, who was our guest, and very illuminating about the world of film music, and he's now doing orchestral concert stuff, and it was great. So thank you, Ron, if you're watching. Appreciate it. And here are the questions.
Yes, so Ray had asked, do your orchestrators typically, orchestrators, the orchestrators typically give you a MIDI rough to approve? And he says, hi, Ray. When I work with orchestrators, I would give them a handwritten sketch. It would be specific sometimes, such as flutes, double top violin line, bassoons, double cello, or something more ambiguous, such as mixed woodwinds and strings, and then let the orchestrator have a go at it. I then review the fully orchestrated score the day before, so I'd be familiar with what I'd be conducting. Mock-ups were not nearly as widespread as they are today. One thing is to keep in mind, while an orchestrator mock-up might sound tremendous, it might not sound nearly as good as when played with an orchestra as orchestrated for the mock-up. Plus, a good mock-up takes time, and I trust that the orchestrator to do a good job, or actually a great job, and I'd rather have him or her spend his or her valuable time on the real thing. And then we had a second and final question from John Nolan, who had asked, hi, Ron, what was it like for you starting out as a composer? And what was challenging and what was easy? And he said, it was a difficult world, John. When I arrived in LA, film composing was more of a niche profession. Now everyone wants to be a film composer. The path used to be much clearer. Learn the craft, and he underlined that, learn the craft. He said click tracks, free timing conducting to picture, punches and streamers, lock it up, how to orchestrate, study the work of the established composers. If you were lucky, you might be able to find an established composer who could employ you in some capacity. I worked for a number of composers on a short-term basis and then eventually was recommended for a job under my own name. I was prepared, and fortunately, my work was well received. People do talk, however, so if your work is subpar, it makes getting the second job much tougher to obtain. Let me emphasize that it's a dramatically different landscape in 2021, so I'd take a much different path today. So anyhow, those are a couple of comments in response to some questions that were asked last week. Do you have anything that you'd like to further add to that, Tom?
John Nolan, this last question, was a former student of mine from Cal State Long Beach, and very talented filmmaker and musician. And he's actually doesn't live that far from Ron up in the San Francisco area, and he's working on learning how to do all this right now. So it's good to hear from him. I'm glad he was watching, and he'll get there. I know he will.
And so again, for those of you who are watching this, again, just post your questions. And we will then run that below you. Let's see if I've got this over here. Just a minute. Yeah. Just please post your comments over there, so that way that we can identify you, say hello, and our guest can answer the question then as well. And this way you don't have to wait until next week, because this is live. It's happening right now. In case you happen to, unless you're watching it later after it's been recorded on Facebook or YouTube. We thank you guys very much for doing that, and encourage you then also to subscribe to the channel, which the channel being on youtube.com/Texas Magician, or on Facebook page is Mincing Movie Magic. And another thing, while you're out there, one of the things I would highly recommend if you have a chance is to seriously consider maybe looking into one of these books. These are a couple of books by Tom Blumquist, and also had a number of people who have been acclaiming how wonderful it is. Right there, just a few people who have taken some pictures of themselves.
I want to thank everybody in there, and I want to point out that you're in the lower right there with the martini glass. Thank you for that. And Dana Shockley, our guest, is one over to the right and above with her glasses, reading the book, and a bunch of other great people, good friends. And I thank everybody, former students, people that have gotten this book and sent pictures, and I appreciate it a lot. So I'm glad they're having fun with it. And I got a few more today and said, oh, wait, I didn't get a picture in. I was, well, send it in. I'll do another posting. So
do another one again at a later time.
Whoever gets the book, they can get it to us, and we'll put it in the next post.
And then get that book at Amazon.com, of course, then too.
Amazon.com or TomBlumquist.com. Right there. There's stuff about both books, about me, whatever. They can read about it, and they can click right there.
Well, now's a good time perhaps for you to introduce your good friend that you had worked with, and a little bit about her background. So who we got with us as our guest today, Tom?
Well, one of the great things about being in this business, as those of you that have been with us watching these shows, one of the very great things about this business is how closely you collaborate with people, and the rather intimate and collaborative, positive bonds that you form with many of them. Ron Raymond was one of those last week, several of the others in previous weeks. But this gal, Dana Shockley, is an editor. I met her when she was an assistant editor. She became an editor. We've done quite a few things together. When I've edited my own little projects, I've gone to her, and she's given me advice and beat me up a little bit to make sure I did it to her standards. And so she can talk about some of the shows she has done, but she's been around the horn on a lot of things, some very fine series. And
such as, name a couple here.
Well, let's see. Well, let's get her on and let her talk about it. Dana, come on in. Tell us about your shows.
Okay.
There she is.
Hi there.
Hello, Dana. Welcome.
So I know you were an assistant back in the heat of the night days. Mm-hmm. And tell us some of your journey of some of the headlines for you that were really fun, either as an assistant or a full editor.
Yeah.
Well, as far as full editor, I have to mention the Christy films. I started on the Christy movies that you were a part of, Tom, and did the first one as an assistant, and then was bumped up to editor for the second one, Choices of the Heart. I've also worked on Veronica Mars, the first season of The Practice, Um, I worked on a version of the Twilight Zone before the most current Jordan Peele version. Ours had Forrest Whitaker as the Rod Serling role. And that was a lot of fun. Every week was completely different in tone, and that one, assisting and editing, was very challenging, to say the least.
Because in that case, you're working with a different director, is that right? And a different producer, and they have different, I mean, they're filmed completely different. They not only have different actors, but the color, the tone, the background, and so they probably have a certain idea of whether they want to be a slow edit or longer or what, I mean, faster or shorter, I assume.
Well, for the Twilight Zone in particular, I was fortunate. I worked on the pilot for it, which was truly a fun experience. And so each episode, it was actually made up of 2 short episodes. So a full episode was 40 minutes, but each portion was about 22 minutes each, I guess. And so the range of stories and subjects, we did some roles or some episodes that were completely unique. And then we did some that were throwbacks to the original series. And but every single episode was unique unto itself. And so the challenges of finding temp music to put into it, having heard you just talk about your composers, we had to do temp music that was completely unique for that episode, and to find the right tone. The sound effects were different from episode to episode. I still remember one of the episodes I worked on as an assistant. I was tasked with doing the sound work, sound design. And we had this sort of demonic bus that basically took people to the underworld, basically. And so they wanted it to sound like a bus, but they also wanted it to have animalistic characteristics. So I had a ton of fun coming up with sound effects to use. When the
So that's part of your editing responsibility, is to select the music and sound effects, and not just I always thought of an editor of just handling the scenes basically and the visual part of it. I didn't think that you edited everything else, including sound. Wow.
That's changed over the years. When I first got started on In the Heat of the Night, an editor basically handled picture, and somebody else down the road did sound effects and music. And over time with digital editing, it's become more and more the responsibility of a picture editor to include sound effects, music, and all of that. And on Twilight Zone, most of my time on Twilight Zone, I was an assistant editor, and my editor had no interest in doing sound work at all. And so that's how I ended up doing the sound work for the demonic bus, basically. But
well, Scott, one of the reasons that occurs is that because of the digital age, directors and producers, when they go to Dana's editing room and they see the cut, they get very impatient. They want to see it finished. They want to hear all the sounds they hear in their heads. They want to hear music that's going to make it great. So when she says temp music, that's literally temp music. It's stock music. It's music from her CD collection at home, whatever it is, because they want to see it as close to finished as possible. In part because some of them are really insecure. They don't want to show it to the producers or the network raw and incomplete like we all used to show things. And it's become a big part of the editor and the assistant editor's job to kind of sweeten these up a little bit. They still have a sound effects editor that'll probably, add more effects. They certainly have a composer or a music supervisor that'll do the real music, because she hasn't got time to find real music. But and then with a show like Twilight Zone, that's an anthology, which means every segment, every episode is a little movie, and it's not really technically related to anything else. And you don't see a lot of anthologies anymore. They're fun for all the filmmakers, certainly for the writers and the directors, because it's like a whole new thing every single time. You don't have the same characters to deal with every week. It's a completely new story. And anthological things, Rod Serling kind of mastered that anthology form, and they've tried to replicate that a number of times on a number of shows, and mixed results, frankly, in some of them.
Well, I would also think with all the digital forms of sound that you have to be kind of up on what's out there. So, I mean, I assume that you're listening to different genres of music all the time then, Dana, and you have some favorites or you have something new. And of course, there are some things I guess you just kind of throw on there, even though it's copyrighted music. It's like, it's not this, but it'll be something kind of like that, I assume.
Yeah, a different episode I was working on, it was a really quirky kind of comedy. And I'm a huge fan of Thomas Newman's work. He is great, especially for television, because his orchestrations are a little simpler. They're not like, you can't put John Williams into most TV shows, but because his orchestrations are huge. Thomas Newman likes to do a lot with piano and very simple. And so the film Salton Sea had come out. And while I hadn't seen the movie, because the music was by Thomas Newman, I bought the soundtrack. And I remember listening to it going, oh, this piece would be perfect in there. And I have to admit that went over really well with the producers, because it was comedic, but it not super comic, but funny. It just had the right balance, and it then gave the composer something to work off of. So yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for my soundtrack collection, which I started even before I got into the business, I was that nerdy girl in high school. Yeah.
I assume you like Danny Elfman also.
I love Danny Elfman. I love Rachel Portman. Randy Newman is no
I love Randy Newman.
Yeah. So, but I tend to go for the smaller orchestrations. Maybe it's because I've worked in TV so much that, the really big orchestrations I don't enjoy.
Well, that kind of answers my next question. I was going to ask about what is the difference really between editing a major feature film as opposed to an episodic adventure on television?
So I've done a little bit of both. Most of the feature films I've worked on as an editor have never really seen the light of day that much, but they are, the schedules are a little more relaxed. And and part of the reason why I like episodic, or really enjoyed working in episodic, was that every 3 weeks, thereabouts, you would get a new episode. And then in another 3 weeks' time, you'd be done with it. And then you get, and so it just kind of kept going. And you would be working usually about 9 months out of the year. Sometimes working on features, you can be on them for several years, which job security wise is kind of a better way to go, I guess. But sometimes with features, I don't feel like they always know when it's as good as it's going to get, and let's move on. So,
you know what? That's one reason a lot of directors and writers prefer television as well, because number one, their work gets seen. I know you did one movie that I liked a lot, The Sex and Breakfast with Macaulay Culkin. Was a really interesting semi-dark independent feature, and it could have gotten a big wide release. I guess it didn't, but it was a very worthy film and a really interesting art film. I think it's a good category for it. But if you're a filmmaker and you put 2 or 3 years of your life into getting that financed and shot and edited and done, and then it's out on video or it shows on Showtime at 2 a.m, then it's not exactly fulfilling for anybody. And that's one reason all these guys are coming into TV. A lot of feature directors are sick of spending years trying to get movies made, Scott, and then they can't get it made, or it gets made and never released.
And never gets greenlighted, or what?
It gets released and 12 people see it, and a lot of people get tired of that. And they're good at their craft, and they want to work, and they want to have their work seen, so they go to TV.
Yeah. It's
well, go ahead, Dana.
I was just going to say that, it is disappointing that it did not sort of get the recognition that it could have deserved, but it was certainly a challenging project to work on. I remember seeing the dailies, especially when I had scenes with Macaulay Culkin, and forgetting to take notes on looking at the dailies because I found his performance so captivating.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a fun side. I tease people and tell them I get to watch TV for a living. That's
lucky person.
Fun part.
You get paid for it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So Dana, could you explain, Scott, to harken back to something Scott kind of implied earlier, he was surprised to hear that you do music and
visual too, right?
To some extent.
Yeah.
So, because he was thinking editors cut, splice film together.
I think of old film like what you and I did when we started.
Yeah. So, would you explain, kind of generally, when she's teaching now at a very fine art school and the Savannah School of Art and Design, and a very elite, prestigious film school. What do you tell your editing 101 students on day one? What is an editor? What's expected of them in the creative process and on the core creative team? Because it's really the writer, producer, director, and editor when it comes down to post. Not to minimize the cinematographer and all of that, but they're done. They're gone. Some of that, most of those guys are finished, and now you've got your core storytelling team. And it's before the composer gets involved. So would you explain what you tell your students to kind of brace them for the world they want to enter?
Mm-hmm. I tell them try and find another line of work. No, not really. No, but I had a student today that said something about, I know I don't want to be an editor, but I have newfound respect for what you do. And I truly appreciated that comment from my student. But so basically, I tell editors that a lot of, my students that you're going to start off as an assistant unless you make some major great films now that garner a lot of attention. But otherwise, you're going to start as an assistant. You need to be organized. Organization is key because you're getting footage. You have to keep track of it all. You need to organize your sound effects, your music, all of that, extremely important. And then, when you are lucky enough to become an editor, is to really maintain a level of diplomacy about what you're doing. And if you have a suggestion, to try and phrase it in a way that's going to be better received than say, oh my God, that sucks. You don't want to say that. And, just basically you want to try and gain a relationship with your producers, directors, so that they want to work with you again, and that you can become a truly collaborative
part of the team and the family.
Team, definitely, because if they don't respect you, then you're going to become a button pusher. And there are quite a few jobs I've worked on where I felt like I was a button pusher. It's part of the reason I enjoyed working with Tom so much, is he relegated me to below button pusher, where I basically just told him what I thought should be done. And it worked really well.
Well, we had some laughs working on something. In fact, we should maybe show the documentary clip here, Scott. But there was a wonderful country music artist named Kellie Coffey, and her company wanted a documentary commissioned about her journey in the music industry. She's the voice of Disney World and Epcot. She was the Best New Female Country Artist of the Year at the ACM Awards. Sold lots of records, and toured with George Strait and all these people, Kenny Chesney. So, and then that ended for reasons of the business and how things can often go and be heartbreaking in the entertainment business. So, I directed the documentary, and Dana edited it, and we spent a lot of hours sitting at my kitchen table or in her editing room at her house and worked on sequences and stuff very collaboratively, really interestingly. But this is not a scripted narrative show like, Veronica Mars or something, but here we are with a documentary, and there's a little sequence that just shows you some emotional content, which is after Kellie had lost her record deal and was talking about her struggles to get pregnant and have a family. So
I'll throw this up over here, and as you and Dana have comments, then I'll let you go ahead. Just you can talk over that.
I was trying to get pregnant at the time, and we were having trouble getting pregnant.
It was so heavy on her heart, and she just turned to me and she said, "I would die for that."
All throughout my journal, I was talking about wanting to have a child.
I mean, she was out here singing when she was pretty sure that she was having a miscarriage.
I wanted more than anything to be a mom. It was my life, and it was real for me.
Just to have one chance, holding my hands with so many have. I would die for that, and I wanna.
Kellie's song is connected with the public, attracting nearly 1 million views on YouTube and CMT.com combined, plus thousands of song downloads from iTunes and other music providers around the world. Kellie's message also received the Hope Award from the national infertility organization, Resolve.
For that.
I didn't think I was going to put it on my record because it was too personal. But when I made the demo for it, I made it actually in Los Angeles, and the engineer who was engineering that day, I came in from singing the vocal, and he was crying, and he said that he and his wife were going through the exact same thing, and that his wife felt like nobody really understood what it was like go through it, and so I knew I had to.
All right. So
Yeah.
tell me something about that.
Dana, want to talk about making choices and letting things breathe and all the things that you and I spent so many hours talking about?
So yeah, it's you know, when it comes to documentaries, unlike scripted work, you are figuring out your story through your sound bites, and then you add the filmed footage sort of over top. So your main goal is to find a way to tell a story, a compelling story, just by using your sound bites. And then everything else can kind of fall into place. And, you know, I know that I had lumps in my throat whenever I got to this section. So I knew it was going to be powerful. And then incorporating the music video that went along with the song as part of it also, I think, just added a layer of emotion and intent. But, you know, it's really, documentary editing is all about the sound bites and finding how to tell the story in the most concise manner, but also it can't be so concise that you lose all emotion. And this is a case in point where the emotion said it all.
Well, and I will say, Scott, that I remember like the first version, you know, because we have a lot of material. We have a lot of interviews with everybody, and you know, the director wants to leave it all in and blah, blah, blah. And I think, I forgot, the first version was 90 minutes or 2 hours long or something. And, you know, Dana said, we got to get rid of some of this. Well, a lot of it was her singing or music performances and concerts and pay-per-view specials. And, you know, I'm like, let's leave it in. This is great. She said, no, it's not what the story's about. The story's about, you know, her heartache and her, and so that's where the collaboration is, because your director is pushing in a direction that may be artistic, but not all that realistic. And then you've got the editor, who's the master storyteller here, objectively saying, no, idiot, that's not the way this needs to be told. And we had so much fun going through that. I mean, literally, she'd bring the hard drive over to my house. We'd sit at my kitchen table. You know, the two dogs would be licking her legs and while we're editing. And then I'd go over to her house and her two dogs would jump in the lap and running your dog chasing the ball all endlessly. But we had so much fun, and we have the highest possible regard for Kellie, and thanks to her and her husband Jeff and Duet Inc., their company, for letting us use that clip because it was a work of true passion and pleasure for both of us. I know it was.
Well, that leaves me.
We had a really good time spread out over a long period of time, because she had, you know, jobs on shows and things in between, and she'd have to go away for a while, and then she'd come back, and she'd have fresh eyes and ears and say, "Oh, I can look at this objectively again." And so it took a while to get it right. Really got it right. Yeah. It's available on YouTube if anybody wants to see it. It's called Kellie Coffey, I'm Still Here.
That leads me to a question then about collaboration. It sounds like the two of you were doing that. And I remember reading a book about the life of, it was by George Lucas, about Skywalker Ranch and everything, about how he would prefer to actually be in a quiet room and by himself. And that's where he had met his wife, I guess, at the time, because she enjoyed doing that too. And so when you were saying, Dana, this is not something that everyone would necessarily like, because it can be a lonely job, and you're kind of, today, I guess, again, hunched over a computer as opposed to kind of splicing film and everything together like that. But it is something that you would really have to do. But again, I guess I've got two questions in there. One has to do with, is that true still? And number two, is this more of a collaborative effort, just as you had done with Tom, where you were talking with the director, or you're talking with maybe the screenwriter? How many people are involved in the collaboration, or do you have the final cut on that, or do you have to respond to the producer or whomever? And I assume that's different for movies as it is TV. Well, I threw a bunch of questions at you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, okay. Let me try and enumerate those. So, and you have to understand, film and television do differ.
Sure.
the director is sort of God on a film set, but and on just feature films in general. Whereas in episodic television, it is actually the executive producers, you know, the people like Tom over there, that are more in charge of the end product. And the way it usually goes, especially both film and television, you've got an editor's cut. So the first pass of the film or TV series is the sort of editor's vision of the project. Then it goes to the director's cut. And from the director's cut, it then goes to, in many cases, to the producers. And then for television, it goes from the producers to the studio. From the studio, then the producers will listen and do what they feel they should. And then some things they'll ignore. Then it'll go to the network. And so the executive producer, especially in television, usually one of them is the creator of the show. And so they have a lot more control over the product than anybody else. But they still have the studio and network that they have to answer to. And similarly with features, the director gets it the way they want, and depending on who else was funding, then they may have say in how they want things to go as well.
So I have a question. One of your most recent projects a year or two ago was Switched at Birth, the series, starring Leah Thompson, who people will remember from Back to the Future and tons of movies. She directed, as I recall, the last episode, which you edited. Am I remembering that correctly?
Sort of.
Okay.
She did direct the episode that I edited.
Okay.
Called
maybe the last one, but it was
Memory
towards the end there. So what was that like? I know she's a fine actor, and she's someone that we have come to know socially, but also, you know, a very good director. But the political dynamic of being with the movie star of the show, actress, director in the editing room is very different than some broken down writer, you know, whose script you're editing. So what is the dynamic differences? Plus two women is kind of interesting, I think. So what was that like?
Oh, well, she's a delight, sweetest woman on the face of the planet. I can't say enough wonderful stuff about her. Plus, she's amazingly talented. It was a great experience having her in the editing room, and she really enjoyed being in the room. Here's the thing, some directors love post-production, and they want to hang out over your shoulder the entire time. And then there are some that it's like, I'll just send you notes. You know, they don't want to be bothered. But Leah really liked to be in the room and worked with me and the editor that I worked with as an assistant. He was originally assigned to the project. So when his schedule freed up, so it was actually the three of us in the room together. And she was just a joy. And one of the things that made me feel great is that it was a very emotional episode that I worked on. And I had found this piece of music that I adored for the end scene. And the whole episode is about this person that's received a heart transplant. And I found a piece of music that had a heartbeat in it. And it was also emotional. And I loved the song. Leah loved the song. And so we finally get around to showing the episode to the producers. And I'm like keeping my fingers crossed. We start to play that scene, and our executive producer goes, stop, turn off the music. I hate it. And I was dumbstruck. And I eventually found another piece of music that's what ended up in the piece. But I went to see Leah and I told her, oh my God, it didn't fly. They didn't like it. They didn't like it? Oh my God. And Leah actually went up to the executive producer and tried to finagle her to listen to the piece of music again and to put it in or leave it in. And our producer just wasn't going to have it. But
Wow.
it is tricky though when you have an actor that's in the show that then directs, and you want to keep your actor happy, you want to keep your directors happy. But in that case, our producer wasn't going to budge, and the piece of music that's in there now is good as well. But somewhere along the way, the music editor changed the edit to the music, and I did not speak up in the mix on the mix stage. And so that piece of music's never quite right for me, unfortunately.
One of the things that I'm reminded of is that many times when actors, like when writers direct or then when actors direct, they become oblivious to their own failings. So a writer will fall in love with the dialogue that they wrote because they wrote it and I thought of it, therefore it must be great. And it doesn't work and it clunks. And in the editing room, usually the sanctity of the editing room, it's like, Scott, it's like a confessional in a Catholic church. Whatever stays there, literally, whatever's said there stays there. It's a rule. And you can go to Moscow in the film studio. Sanctity of the editing room is anything can be said and nothing will ever leave the room.
Interesting.
And one of the things that is said is, who wrote this shit? And I can't but look at her, the way she twitches her face. I hate her. She's the star of the movie or the show.
Right.
And when you have a
They
writer
go outside that room.
But when you have a writer who's the director and they're in the room and you want to say that dialogue is horrible, or you want to say, God, I wish she'd stop making that weird, funny face.
Yeah.
You have to have an actor who's self-aware and they can actually step out of their ego and look and go, oh my God, I look like crap. Well, do we have another take? Because I'm horrible. and I know Leah Thompson has been in business a long time and she's very self-aware. Not all actors who direct, at least at first, are. And on TV series, they often will fall in love with their own image and then they, whatever they do is brilliant. And it's hard to, when you're an editor, to say, well, maybe we could find another take here, because the diplomacy she's talking about.
Well, in that regard, I was going to say, well, first of all, it's interesting. You kind of glossed over what you said, a director's take, and I often wondered earlier on, sorry, just to kind of backtrack, what a director's take is, because the director's cut always seem to be longer. And then I guess, as you say, it goes into the producers, and they kind of cut it back because we've only got a certain amount of time. So the director may want 2.5 hours, but you end up getting an hour and a half or an hour 45 or something out of it.
It happens all the time.
What's that?
Happens all the time.
Happens all the time. But I did want to go to, speaking of the cuts, of just a couple of examples that we've got here of showing a couple of shots and then how it was put together. So do you want to?
So this is a short comedy film that I directed. In fact, Kellie Coffey's husband wrote it and produced it and stars in it. You'll see him. And Dana was the assistant editor on this with her friend and mentor. Tim Shank was the lead editor. And we all had a wonderful time making this little goofy movie with some very prominent people in the film industry.
What was the name of the movie and where was it shown?
It was called Prison Life. It's on YouTube and Vimeo, and some very, very prominent people from across the film industry came and worked on this for free because they liked the script, which was based on a little short play. And what I pulled to show, and so Dana can talk about it, is you're going to see these are dailies. People have heard about dailies. So here's the footage. You see the time code there that Dana works with. All these numbers mean something to her. And and let's watch a little bit of this, and you'll get an idea of the raw footage.
Is next to godliness. Truer words have never been spoken. Now we can never forget from whence we have come. The brave pioneers who showed us the true path to the future. Do I hear an Amway? Hallelujah, hallelujah, for tonight, my friends. Tonight is not about where we have been. It's about where we are going. For this is.
So this is about a bunch of convicts that get into
an
Amway type pyramid marketing scheme.
And there are those who would sell our very souls.
Sorry to step on your joke there, Joe.
No, that's quite right.
So this is a take, and then you do several takes. We just kept rolling. In some instances, other times we'd cut, and then give him some direction, or he'd say something wrong. Now they're putting glycerin in his eyes, so every time we push in, you see more and more emotional tears on his face.
Another light shines.
And they kept going. I actually had to leave the room during this. In a prison in Los Angeles, and I had to leave and go down the cell block and leave because I couldn't stop laughing. He's such a goofball, and so we're.
Do another one.
So now we punched in for a closer shot, and this becomes a musical. This stupid show, and
thank you, brothers.
So here's a tighter angle. We do the whole thing again.
And you say, obviously, each of those little timestamps, I mean, that's what, Dana, you're going by.
Yeah, I mean, it's more important for the finished product. The time code up at the top is what tells the computer and everything what is being used in the cut, so that then when we're ready to finalize everything, that is what we're going on.
Can you talk just a moment also about how the clapboard has evolved from just the old chalk clapboard to the digital thing? I assume that is tied directly to those numbers under there at the time.
They do have the time code on them. They're called smart slates. Okay. And usually the time code, especially if you have more than one camera going, the slate, the clap will line up with the time code for both cameras, and also then usually the audio that's being recorded, so that number, the 0504 up at the top there, is will be it'll be what's referred to as jam synced, so that all of the elements will have the exact same time code on them.
So in this sequence, you see him doing his sermon about these Amway type products. And by the way, when we show you the finished version in a second, you see a lot of other shots. Every one of those shots had multiple takes as well. We're not going to waste your time there. Here they are putting this up in his eyes again. So he's really oiled up here by the end of the scene. And but you'll see how many shots there are, and there's multiple takes to everything. Plus, we have audio playback of many of the people you'll see in the other shot are professional singers, and a lot of them playing on the audio track. And one of the things you'll notice is he says, "Do I hear an Amway?" Well, we were counseled by an attorney that you really can't have Amway products being sold by convicts in a prison. They're probably going to sue you.
Oh, so you had to change the name of the product.
And so we changed it. We had to cut away from him and put in the fake product called Way Clean that we invented that was cleared, because we didn't want Amway to be, mad or offended. That wasn't the intention. It's Amway type products, that pyramid.
Yeah, a multi-level marketing thing,
so
right?
Here he is. So he's we're doing a little playback on a little cassette player, but you can hear it, and it's all being synced. so, and you'll see how this all plays in a second. So the crew is dying. I mean, people are, stuffing, their handkerchiefs in their mouth. It's so stupid to be present when this is happening. So anyway, why don't we go to the finished version, and we'll just let it play, and you can listen to see how it all looks finished, and then Dana can explain whatever.
All righty. That's a big guy.
Yeah, that's Kellie Coffey's husband. He sang on the Beauty and the Beast, the Aladdin soundtracks. He's a fine singer, music.
Wow, really?
And a college professor himself in Oklahoma
Who
City.
are all these? Are these guys choristers?
Many of them are singers.
Yeah.
Found our way to way clean, always.
But you're saying this was actually shot in a prison?
Yeah.
Wow.
Civil Brand Prison. That's where they kept the Manson girls when they arrested them for the murder.
Oh, Sneaky Farm and all that? Yeah.
It's right in downtown L.A.
Herbal sunrise.
Wow.
In East L.A.
Girl, you're gonna love it. I just don't want to smell like a girl. Trust me. Like in mother's arms, we're home again. Way clean, forever, my friend.
Here comes the sermon that you saw a second ago.
Thank you, brothers. Now, it's been said that cleanliness is next to godliness. Truer words have never been spoken. Now, we can never forget from whence we have come, the brave pioneers who showed us a true path to the future. Hallelujah! 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 For tonight, my friends, tonight is not about where we have been. It's about where we are going. Do I hear way clean? Way clean! My brother, let us welcome a new believer. Shine your light!
And Way Clean was the name of the product you came up with.
Yeah, it's not just clean, Scott. It's way clean.
Way Clean.
It's a brand new day. We're gonna testify. Sing the praise. We sing the light. Cells are clean and shining bright. Ships are smelling fresh tonight. Since we found Way Clean. Eddie was a natural. I became a silver and then a gold medallion distributor, and Eddie.
So he's got tears coming down his cheeks. Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, you get the point. There were a lot of shots there. Music playback, all the lighting, the fog that had to be laid in down the cell block, all of that. You do it over and over and over again to get the shots. So anything you want to toss in there, Dana, about how something like this is put together?
No, I mean, it really comes down to performance. That is what I try and drill into my students' heads, is that, it's really about performance is key, as is but you're not just looking there. You want to look and see which camera move is the best. The lighting is the best, the sound. You have to look at the big picture. Yes, you're primarily focusing on performance, but you also need to be paying attention to set design. Oh my gosh, a light isn't quite hung right or something. So you have to take everything into consideration when you're choosing your performance and when you want to cut away to something else and, get a reaction shot here and a reaction shot there. Actually, Tim, who edited this, Tim Shank, he gave me some really great advice when I first got in the business. he had noticed that I was always cutting two-person scenes. And at one point on In the Heat of the Night, we were working on an episode that was taking place predominantly in a courtroom. And so once again, I was offering to edit a two-person scene. And Tim was like, no, you're going to edit one of these courtroom scenes. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And he said, yes, you're going to edit one of the courtroom scenes. And I'm like, it's too much footage. Oh my God, it's too scary, you know? And he gave me some great advice. He said, read the script and basically get your performances for the lines on camera. Just get those lined up on your timeline, figure it out. And then you'll be ready to do the reaction shots. You'll start to see, oh, we should see the judge here, the defendant, the jury. And so by just laying in the actual lines of dialogue that are scripted, then everything else kind of falls into place. But if you think of it with like 20 different camera setups, you'll drive yourself insane. So that was great advice. I still pay attention to it to this day. And I loved him for it.
No, he's a great editor and a good guy. And so I hope he's well and happy. I think we all learned a lot from him, and I certainly learned a lot from you about editing. Would you explain for a second? A lot of people have, the editing software that came with their computer. What's the one everybody uses on the Mac?
Like iMovie?
Yeah, iMovie. So people have iMovie, and they understand, many people, how the basics of that work. You don't use that. What you use has many more levels of sophistication. And
iMovie's a lot easier than Final Cut Pro or any of those, yeah.
Yeah, well, Final Cut Pro.
DaVinci.
We used to use Final Cut Pro in the old days. It was a great program. The Kellie Coffey's documentary was cut in Final Cut.
That's right.
But people have iMovie. Would you explain somehow simply for them how what you use it differs, how your demands are different? Why don't you just use iMovie? Everybody else does.
Well, iMovie's great. Final Cut is also really good. The film Parasite was edited on Final Cut, so it's no slouch. Sex and Breakfast was edited on Final Cut. And some of the major software that we use, I use something called Avid Media Composer. It is a professional system of editing. It has more ability to not just edit, but then finalize, which I think is the big difference. With iMovie, you bring your footage in, you cut what you want to cut, you export something, and you're good to go. With Avid and a little bit with Final Cut, you have to do something called an edit decision list, an EDL, that you have to generate in order to get your product into the best resolution and image quality possible for finishing. And then that can go into DaVinci for color correction. So it's definitely a more professional editing software, just because it can help with keeping track of time code, naming conventions, and bin organization. I mean, we're talking most episodic television, you'll get somewhere between 7 and 10 days of dailies. And each day of dailies can be 1 to 2 hours long. So I think most projects that somebody does in iMovie is maybe an hour or 2 tops. So just the sheer magnitude of the footage you're getting tends to lend itself more to the slightly more robust Avid media composer, and Premiere is now getting a lot more use.
User friendly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can just organize it a lot better, the bigger software.
Let me ask you just a question which has two different questions. One was, what was one of your best experiences and one of your worst experiences? Whichever you want to answer first, whatever comes to mind.
Okay, best experience, I would say would have to be working with our gentleman here, Tom Blumquist, on
him being aside. Oh, go on.
Choices of the heart. I mean, I have never had so much fun editing in my life. It was a great opportunity because I had been mostly assisting, and they kind of took a chance on me and let me edit. But I have to tell you, it was kind of bittersweet because at one point I had sent the editor's cut or the director's cut to Tom, and I get a phone call from him going, "Oh my God, it's terrible." And I'm thinking, oh no, my editing career is over before it's even started, you know? Okay, I'm just gonna crawl under a rock now. And anyway, he's like, "No, Dana, I know it's not all on you. It's just, we've got a lot of work to do."
There were circumstances to that, and I knew that. But thank you for that compliment. One of the things that was fun about it, I came. We were shooting in Vancouver. I went down to LA. We worked together for a while, and then she came up to Vancouver with me, and we edited most of it up there. And so her mom came up. We had big dinners. It was really fun, and it was a wonderful episode, wonderful script. It was the second of the 3 movies, and it just the script. Philip Gerson's script was just really good and needed, that extra time to ripen on the vine. And unfortunately, in the process of working with the director and him finishing his work under a deadline with her, it just wasn't everything that script needed to be. And so it was time. This is what a showrunner does. You take it over and say, okay, let's spend the time and do it. And we did, and it was really fun. Thank you for that compliment. And it was fun working with you too. No kidding, that was great.
It was, a lot of it was, there was a creativity that you just, this idea would spark this idea. And it was a true collaboration, I felt. And, Tom, even though he knew I hadn't done a lot of editing, was treated me as an equal and respected my ideas, and it was just a lot of fun working on that. So I also have to say I truly loved working on Veronica Mars, and Switched at Birth was very special as well. I have an editor I worked with a lot named Mitchell Danton, and Mitch is one of the sweetest men on the planet, and I can't say enough about working for him or with him, because he truly made it feel like it was a collaborative team effort. So those were all great experiences.
How about a terrible experience? Can you?
Yeah, let's hear a go horror story.
Without naming names, please.
Without naming names. I worked on a project where my editor was fired, and he was fired after 5 days of dailies, and there was just 1 day left. That day when we got dailies, they were bringing on another editor. The editor watched the previous version of the cut, and he refused to take the job.
Whoa.
I stupidly thought I would jump in and save the day.
Save the day, yeah.
No, never works. I don't recommend it. Leave your capes in your clothes. Don't take them out. It never works well. And so I basically busted my butt to get the cut finished. And I worked like the entire weekend. I had to turn the cut over on Monday. And my producers were like, "Oh my God, this is terrible." And they were like, "Dana, I expected better of you." I'm like, you know, and I was hoping my associate producer was there, knew that I had stepped in to try and save the day, and did not stand up for me.
Wow.
And explain that 5 days of dailies had already been cut. If you didn't like the editor's work, maybe you should have fired him before he started dailies on this episode. You
But
know?
he just let you swing in the breeze.
And I was left high and dry. And
Wow.
and I had helped that AP get the job.
Oh.
Which really felt good. So good.
But it's Scott, it's one of those times where everybody goes, "Oh, I don't know." And I remember when that happened, and shame on them, but it does happen, and it's part of the diplomacy, and political, cesspool dynamic of the film business.
And I knew if I tried to stand up for myself and say, but I did what I could with the limited
weekend,
time.
over a weekend.
I was working insane hours, and at some point I couldn't even think straight. People were throwing notes out at me, and I was like, "Hey guys, I've been up for 18 hours straight. I can't think anymore." And it's like, give me a chance. If they had just allowed me a few extra days, I could have recut all the scenes that the previous editor had done. And it would have probably been a very different screening. But instead, team player that I am, I was trying to keep everybody to the deadlines and do what I thought was the right thing. And the only person it ended up hurting was me, because they almost weren't going to give me another chance to edit. And that's where the editor I worked with on Veronica Mars, we met on this particular show, and Alan Sheffland went to bat, went to those producers and said, she deserves a second chance. She deserves a chance to edit something from scratch.
Wow.
And
what a fine person.
What's that?
What a fine person. That's a stand-up professional,
Yeah.
And
There's a difference between the two there.
He wasn't even my editor. He was actually, but he was very sweet and looked after me.
He also knew. He knew what you do and what you can do. And, Scott, like we talked the other week about assistant directors and second assistant directors, editors and assistant editors often bounce back and forth with a fair amount of fluidity, depending on the project, depending on the job, depending on who the lead editor is. You might want to be an assistant to them because they're great and they're a friend. So it happens a lot.
Does the assistant editor do less work than the editor?
Oh, that's a loaded question there.
Dana, let me just tell you, I'll speak for Dana. She sits around smoking cigars and drinking cognac with her feet up. That's what she does as an assistant.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we're in charge. We organize all the dailies that come in. The main role of an assistant editor is organization, keeping our editors working.
Kind of like what the AD does for the director.
Right. And then when the editor is finished with the product, then it falls back on the assistant to then get everything finalized. And so it gets to the sound department, the composer, color correction, up-resing or onlining, all of that. So assistants are kind of left to their own devices a little bit while the editing process is often happening. But, you know, we're really busy during dailies. We're really busy when we're finalizing. And that middle section is when we're then helping to lay in sound effects and music. Or I would often be asked to edit scenes, or I would offer to edit scenes to help my editor stay up to camera and that kind of thing. So.
Gotcha.
The editors just get to edit all day, the lucky SOs. So.
As we kind of start to wrap up over here, I want to make sure I kind of answer all the questions or something, but are there any tips that you would give people as final advice, or when you were, again, Tom has asked a question earlier, but would be something for people who are wannabe editors or wanting to go into this part of the film and television business? Would you say, come on in, the water's fine, or it's going to take some time, or you might want to be a carpenter, or what's your advice?
I would encourage anybody that has a passion for putting puzzles together, which is a lot of what editors or assistants end up doing. It's just kind of putting all the pieces together in the right order. Then go for it. It's an extremely rewarding and enjoyable profession. Yeah, I had some hard knocks along the way, but I also have some incredible friends and colleagues that I've met, and I wouldn't change it for anything. So if you love TV or movies and you have any kind of inclination toward editing, go for it.
Good advice. Good advice. Tom, anything you want to ask? We start to close out here.
I think Dana said it all. You know, I mean, she's an educator now, edits on the side. She's a full-time educator. Got a great job at a great school, and that's really cool. And I know what that feels like, and I'm happy for her. I hope we get to do something again. We're both on, you know, on the East Coast, so we're close. We can actually work on something together now.
I could probably get some crew members really easily.
Right. Or we can sit at your kitchen table this time. Anyway, but it's really nice to see when someone has worked really hard to learn all of this and has had some of the hard knocks and so forth, and the triumphs, to then turn to teaching, to share what that's like. When Tyler Stratton was on the show a couple weeks ago, was assistant editor, Dana. He goes back now to Long Beach every semester and talks to the film students, and he's already sharing. He's been out of school, 10, 12 years, and he's already sharing what he's learning in the real world with the students, and you can see where that's heading for him. I mean, ultimately, he'll be on the faculty at that school or some other teaching film production from a realistic point of view. Here's how it really works. Here's what you really need to know. And you're doing that. And I tried to do it. And it's unbelievably rewarding. So well done.
Thank you.
Well, Dana, thank you very much. Appreciate you being our guest. If you want to hang around for just a little bit after we end the broadcast, kind of hang out and chat for just a little bit longer. But I want to thank you. I'll take you out over here for a minute. Thanks again.
Everybody.
All righty. Bye.
See you, Dana.
And Tom, this has been another delightful conversation we've had with a professional that's I've learned a lot again here. You just keep bringing in more and more guests that just get better and better all the time. You got
thanks, and it's, I mean, these are great people. Every one of them you've seen. I mean,
sure.
They're talented, open, honest, fun. Great people. So hopefully we have a couple very good ones coming up. I encourage everybody to come back in the next weekend too, for sure, because we have some very interesting guests lined up. Can't tell you which one's going to be in which week yet, but it's going to be good.
I'm looking forward to it again myself every week when you say, hey, I got so-and-so. It's like, I can hardly wait to let the rest of the world know about who's going to be coming, because they're always really great. So I thank you very much for arranging for this and tapping into your friends. It looks like that you obviously have a great working relationship. And one of the things I kind of want to keep coming back to, and we tend to week after week, and that is family. It seems to be the one word that even Dana had alluded to, that the importance of working with people who are not just friends, but they're family, because you're working so long hours, and you have to understand each other's needs, and it has to be something that you really do enjoy the person and want to work with them, and then you go back and work with them then again. So it really is.
Mike Leary, hey Mike. Well,
Yep.
You know what? I thank you for that, and you are correct. There's your professional family, your association of people you work with, and then there's people that actually become your family. I mean, people, you get so close to them that it's like they are relatives of yours. And, Dana's certainly one of those, and so several of the other people you've met.
Sure.
And when you put those kind of hours in, 80 and 100 hours a week, week after week, month after month with people, either you learn to really hate each other, and it does happen, or you learn that you're, just switched at birth, kind of, that you're like, oh my, how'd this happen? Because we're one person when we're together. And so when it works like that, it's the best feeling there is. When it works like this, it's one of the worst feelings that you've ever had.
Yeah.
I've had plenty of both, but it's the ones that are the Dana Shockleys of the world, the Victoria Burrows of the world, that Steve Sears, these people that you collude on so many emotional and creative levels, and it's wonderful. So thank you for that. And I hope people are enjoying these.
Well, I think they are, and each week we tend to get more and more people who are coming in and enjoying the.
And by the way, Mike Leary, who just beamed in, was not one of those people that was like family. Let's get that straight right now. Anybody saw the Mike Leary episode?
Yeah, Mike was here just a couple of weeks ago.
Like him. He's a horrible human being. Just want to say that.
I'll second that. For those of you who didn't see that or hear that episode, go back and listen. Mike was one of our old fraternity brothers.
And what a great guest he was. Even if he's a despicable person, he was a fabulous guest.
Yeah, exactly. Love that. Really do. A very successful career then also in commercial television.
Absolutely.
On television as well. Well, listen, thanks very much then. I appreciate it. Tom, this has been another one. So, yeah, there you go.
There he is. That's him, everybody.
That is great. So thanks again. I appreciate it. And until next week, let's see if I get the right one over here. There we go. That was Tom Blumquist. This is Scotty out.
Thanks for being with us. Please join us again next time for Mincing Movie Magic.